Government is not reason. Government is not eloquence. Government is force. And like fire, it's a dangerous servant and a fearful master. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. My name is Daniel Hapney, and this is The Real Story. You know, I was thinking, I've been doing this for about 2.5, almost 3 years. And if you listen to me for 3, 4, 5, whatever years, I really haven't changed my tune. But for you viewers out there, yeah, when I first started the first Real Story show, I told you that these globalist bankers were going to take down our economy. You know, and I told you that this creation of credit, the fiat money, that everybody can borrow money, the zero money down, that this was all a scam and a game for the problem reaction solution that they use. They create the problem, loose credit, loose money. Everyone malinvests because the money's easy to get. You didn't have to work for it, okay? Our government just prints it. And in case our government, our private banking cartel called the Federal Reserve. Why am I saying ours? Their private banking cartel called the Federal Reserve System, okay, prints this money from nothing. So anyway, 3 years ago, I tell you, economic calamity's coming. Many of you might have listened, many of you may didn't see the show, maybe you're watching it now, but go back and watch the previous shows. Find out for yourself, find out if I lied. Evidently I was right, okay? And I'm trying to help you today. And the other thing I said, I came on the air and I said, geez, besides this economic thing they're setting up, and they're setting up to take our republic down, I said that, gee, this 9/11 thing doesn't add up. It's not right. And now it's been years later, and what have we learned from 2001 to present? Well, we've learned that, the planes didn't cause the buildings to collapse. We found out, well, let's show you this, here's a little bit of thing on, thermate, and thermatic, once again, explosives being used to take the buildings down. This was scoffed at first, said, oh, that can't be. But watch Building 7. Here's the Building 7 clip. It fell by itself. First buildings ever was 9/11 to fall based on fire. They took the plane impacts and they took those fires, and the fires were pretty much out. You can listen to the firemen talk about that. But think about it. They told us there was some guys in a cave. Conveniently, they had these patsies, and they found things like passports in the rubble. So the plane impacts, crashes, burns, building collapses, they find a passport. Then we're told it was guys with box cutters. And that came out because of a conversation between Ted Olson and his wife. And Mrs. Olson said, oh, they've got knives or box cutters. Well, we find out in 2006, thank you, the FBI, that she never made contact with her husband, Ted Olson, that her phone tried to connect but didn't, and had not a connection and had 0 seconds of talk on it. So we found out that this guy lied to us. And then we looked at the Pentagon and we said, well, where's the debris? Where's the debris that would be a 757? And we were told, oh, we're conspiracy theorists. But now it's years later and you've been lied into wars based on weapons of mass destruction. You've been lied into, them spying on you. You've been lied into making FEMA camps. You've been lied into what? Getting rid of posse comitatus. You've been lied. Why am I saying this? Have you been lied to? Did they lie to you? I mean, now they can torture people in the United States. Do you know that? Thank you, 9/11 lie. Now they spy on Americans every day. Thank you, 9/11 lie. And the guys who sold you this lie, okay, wasn't just the Bush and Cheney Republicans, it was also the Democrats. They pushed for it too. Remember anthrax? Do you remember anthrax? Right after 9/11, anthrax is released. We all have to have scare. They used fear. They used terror on you. And it wasn't Osama bin Laden who used terror, who happened to be friends with the Bushes. That's like the Hinckleys having dinner with the Bushes the day before Reagan gets shot. Look it up. Did the Hinckleys have dinner with the Bushes the evening before Reagan was shot by a Mr. Hinckley? Hey, kind of weird, huh? But it's interesting now that 9/11 goes on, and it's years later, and now we find with spectrometers, okay, and electron microscopes that in the dust of the rubble is traces of explosives. Well, it's kind of funny. It's nanotechnology explosives, and the companies and the scientists who work on that also happen to work at NIST, the National Institutes of Science and Technology. And they're the ones who put out the report, we don't know how the buildings fell. I don't know how World Trade Center fell. I don't know how World Trade Center 7 fell. We don't know. It must be thermal expansion. The steel was weakened. We're told all these lies. Now we find out, with the smoking gun, give them the smoking gun.
Right now we're looking at 4 principal samples of the World Trade Center dust. We all saw these huge dust clouds as the buildings came down. What's really important then is what's in the dust, because that tells us what happened. during the collapse. Early on, I saw these chips, red chips, and so several months ago I decided we had to take a closer look, and it was quite remarkable. We're still studying that, and now in at least 3 different laboratories studying these red chips. They do have the chemical composition of thermite. We use a magnet to extract the iron-rich fraction, and that's where we see these red chips in abundance. They're rich in iron, and also the spheres, iron, aluminum, oxygen spheres, very common in the dust. I've reproduced those spheres that we see in the dust actually with commercial thermite.
Ready?
Yep.
Yeah, that was fairly dramatic. That was glowing more than the other.
So as molten iron is sprayed into the air from the thermite reaction, it forms into a sphere roughly due to surface tension, and those solidify in the air, and so all that information is preserved in the dust. And we then look at the dust and are learning a great deal about what happened on 9/11 from these examinations.
Now, what do you think? Now that you know that explosives use, do you honestly believe the guys in Afghanistan dug a cave, because they're cave dwellers? Remember, we're supposed to be afraid of guys, and they dug under the continent, and they dug under the ocean, and they popped up in New York City and put all these bombs in these buildings. Kind of interesting, huh? Yeah, and we're told the bomb-sniffing dogs were removed by none other than who was running Securicom? Why is Securicom important? Was Securicom the company in charge of security at World Trade Center? Was Securicom run by Whit Walker? Whit Walker, why do I know? Herbert Walker Bush? Oh, Walker, that name, that family name. Hey, was it also Marvin Bush who was in charge of security? So the president's brother's in charge of security at New York City World Trade Centers, and the bomb-sniffing dogs are taken off weeks earlier. And then the buildings collapse, and it's funny, because the banker's stealing and cheating from you. You've seen that because you know of AIG, you know about derivatives now, because you watched the earlier shows. Yeah, well, Building 7, what was in it again? Oh, that's right, all the Securities and Exchange records for the Enron scandal. And who would that have implicated? Boy, isn't that how they got rid of Gray Davis, the California governor, give you Arnold Schwarzenegger? Yeah, it's a guy who wears a Nazi belt buckle. Yeah, and let's see, Nazis. Hey, let's go back to the Prescott-Bush thing, so you know that the Bush family and Nazis go together, like Thiessen and soup, you know? Here's this clip.
Now we will explore how the American branch of the Illuminati aided and abetted Adolf Hitler, and how the Bushes were the first family when it came to treason.
I've been an investigative reporter and a journalist for 35 years. I've worked in every major media market in the United States, and I've written for more than 100 newspapers and magazines nationally and internationally. So last September 17th, I became the first journalist in U.S. history to go to the U.S. National Archives and the Library of Congress and pore over the thousands of pages of documents in both places to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt or any refutation of the facts that Prescott Bush, the grandfather of George W. Bush, and George Herbert Walker, his maternal great-grandfather for whom his daddy is named, were Nazi traitors to the country who should have been tried for treason. 2 weeks ago, in early August, a major world newspaper, The Guardian of London, finally got on the story internationally, and they flew a renowned reporter of theirs named Duncan Campbell over to Washington to take me back to the archives and Library of Congress so that they could verify that these explosive documents were real and I didn't have forged copies. Prescott Bush was the grandfather of George W. Bush and the father of George Herbert Walker Bush, and George Herbert Walker Bush is named for his father-in-law, George Herbert Walker. Prescott Bush graduated from Yale in 1917 and was in Skull and Bones with E. Roland Harriman, who was the younger brother of W. Averill Harriman. The Bush family really had nothing going. They were essentially social climbers and opportunistic people. At the time that Prescott Bush met Dorothy Walker, he was a tire salesman. And George Herbert Walker, as all fathers do when their daughter's going to marry someone, said in his heart, you know, it's not an appropriate thing socially that my daughter marry a tire salesman. So he brought Prescott Bush first into Brown Brothers Harriman and then Union Banking Corporation.